Hello, it's good to have you here again on Nath Speaks. My name is Nath McAbraham-Inajoh, and this is going to be the third episode in our discussion on how to improve on your speaking skills. In case you missed the earlier two editions or episodes, you might need to go to my YouTube channel and see them there. And if you've not subscribed to this channel yet, please go ahead and subscribe, and then turn on your notifications so that you can get to know when I put up a new video. In this episode, I'll be speaking on the types of presentations or speeches you could make. Don't forget, we're talking about how to improve on your speaking skills. Now, when you have an opportunity to give a talk, what type of talk is it going to be? There are basically four options available to you, and I'll just go through each of them quickly so that you can determine what works for you. And don't forget, the situation quite often determines which of them that you adopt. Number one, you have what is generally referred to as the manuscript presentation, where you are going to be speaking from a manuscript, basically because you have written out the speech and you are reading it to an audience. A manuscript presentation has a number of advantages. First, it helps you to keep to the content you intend to share with the audience. You're not likely going to ramble around the subject matter, and you're not likely going to be fumbling for words as you go along. Number two, it helps you to stay within the time allocated to you for the presentation, because it is all written out, and once it is done, you're done. So it does that for you. Number three, it also helps you to defend yourself in case somebody takes what you have said out of context or misquotes you. You can always present the manuscript that you read from. It also has a number of drawbacks. Chief amongst them is the fact that it is inflexible. Let's assume, for instance, that you were told you had 25 minutes for your speech, and for some reason the organizers are under pressure for time, and they say, oh, sorry, we cannot give you 25 minutes anymore, we can only give you 5 minutes. What are you going to do? It's always tough to make that adjustment right there and then if you still want to read from the manuscript. And then a number of people find it difficult to engage with the audience while they are reading from a manuscript. By engagement here, I'm talking about maintaining eye contact. So they are fixed on they are fixated on their manuscript, and they hardly look up while they are reading. That leads to a situation where there is a disconnect between the speaker and the audience, because if you're talking to me and not looking at me, I might as well be doing other things while you're talking. Number three drawback is that a lot of people, when they are reading, they read in this flat, monotonous voice that is not engaging, that does not modulate. It doesn't sound natural. So if you want to adopt the manuscript presentation, you can overcome all the drawbacks. You can convert the disadvantages into strengths, and then you can have an excellent presentation. You can practice a manuscript presentation and deliver it in such a way that sometimes it almost sounds as good as if you're not reading from a manuscript. The second type of option, the type of speech you could make, is called the memorized speech. In this instance, you have written out your entire speech, and now you commit everything to memory. And on the day of the event, when you're called up, you merely recite from memory that which you have memorized. That is a tall order for most of us. Few people have the capacity to memorize large chunks of information and deliver the same thing they've memorized perfectly. Most of us will fidget and we would forget. May I draw your attention to the fact that usually when people forget what they have memorized, in order to remember, they often would have to go back to the beginning and start all over again and get to that point, and then they're able to reconnect. And that becomes embarrassing both to the speaker and to the audience. And it also has some of the drawbacks of the manuscript presentation, because if you have memorized the speech and you're told you have a shorter time for your presentation, what are you going to do? It's difficult to cut out some part and continue with your presentation, because everything is fixed in your memory as a whole package. And then, of course, you realize what happened to you when you were in class and you're writing an exam when you're in school. You forgot a little bit of information. Where did your eyes turn? You're correct. They looked up because often when we're trying to recollect something, we look up. And when you're looking up, you're not looking at the audience. And so there's a disconnect again. And then sometimes too, some persons, while they're looking at the audience and maybe somebody smiles at them or waves at them, that could distract them and they forget what they were supposed to say next. So the memorized presentation is okay, but you have to be extremely good to be able to pull this off. I'm not advocating that you don't memorize at all. There are little bits of information you can memorize in your presentation. For instance, short quotations, statistical data you like to infuse here and there, a little joke here and there. You can memorize those. But I would personally not recommend that you memorize your entire presentation. Number 3, you have the impromptu speech. This is the speech you make when you were not ready. You show up at an event and your intention is to participate in the event like every other person that was invited. You are not the speaker and suddenly you're invited to say something. Sometimes either because the speaker did not turn up or in response to an issue that came up in the course of the presentation. And you were looking at your phone, suddenly you heard your name being called out and you have been invited to come say a few words and you are all petrified and lost. But you see, you can actually prepare for the impromptu speech by always asking yourself this question: what if I'm called upon to say something at this event? Because you see, sometimes your inexperience might actually be what the audience needs at that point in time. Could I share a personal story with you about this? I remember attending a marriage seminar a few weeks after I got married, and the speakers were very experienced people sharing 25 years of experience in marriage, 10 years, and I was so comfortable just sitting there in my corner because I was like, hey, everybody here knows I just got married a few weeks ago, so nobody's going to ask me to say anything. But guess what? At some point, the coordinator looked at me and said, oh, yes, come and tell us what the last 2 weeks have been like. And I wasn't prepared to say anything. But fortunately, because I had always been involved in speaking and coaching people on how to speak well, I took my own medicine. So I got up and simply said, well, for me, we've been through the forming stage. We are currently going through our storming stage, and I hope we get to the norming stage and ultimately to the performing stage. And everybody laughed because they understood exactly what I was talking about, and that was it. And it was because, in a way, I had prepared myself by asking myself that question: what if I was called upon to say something? So it could be on anything, you know. Don't ever answer that question in the negative, that, oh no, nobody's going to invite me to say something. They just might ask you to say something, even if what you need to say is to share your inexperience about the subject matter. So that way, when you're called upon, yes, you are momentarily surprised, but you can quickly gather your thoughts together and give a very intelligent speech. Now, because it is an impromptu speech, nobody expects you to give a well-researched presentation. You might make some mistakes, you might make some false starts, you might even make some grammatical mistakes because you're under pressure. But you see, how quickly do you recover from those mistakes? That is what is important. And then don't make it too long. If it's an impromptu speech, everybody knows you are speaking off the cuff. So don't make it too long, because what happens when you begin to drag it all out is, number one, you begin to repeat yourself, and number two, you begin to go off point, and three, you are going to offend the audience, because the goodwill they extended to you when you were called upon, you know, they were sympathetic to the fact that you were not prepared. But after a while, when you begin to drag it all out, you begin to bore them, and I hope you don't get them to boo at you. And number four, the last type of speech I'm going to talk about today is the extemporaneous presentation, the extemporaneous speech. Now, every good speaker speaks extemporaneously. This is that speech that you have taken time to prepare for, you have internalized all the points, you have made the subject matter a part of your thinking, and when you stand out to speak, you are literally speaking from your heart. most extemporaneous speakers don't speak from manuscripts, and perhaps at the best they might just have a few bullet points on a cue card or on their phones or whatever it is that they came to the podium with. And those are just supposed to be a few keywords or phrases that were supposed to act as prompters when they speak. We all love extemporaneous speakers because somehow they seem to connect with us. They speak in a conversational tone. They are passionate because their passion shows through their choice of words and their body language. And somehow we tend to rate them to be very intelligent people. I give you a very simple illustration. If two speakers were to speak right next to each other, and one person came and gave a good presentation but read from a manuscript, and the second person came and gave an equally good presentation but spoke from his heart, chances are the audience will rate the second speaker higher than the first, because they're going to say, oh, he said so much, he gave us so much facts without referring to anything. So you can become an extemporaneous speaker, but it comes with a lot of work. And in subsequent interactions, I will share with you the things you can do to make you an effective extemporaneous speaker. Think about the great speakers you love and admire. Chances are most of them tend to speak extemporaneously, and you can also be one of such speakers. Thank you for being with me today, and don't forget, subscribe to this channel and turn on your notifications. See you next time. Bye-bye.